Atticus, thank you so much for making the time. I want to start the conversation about the founding story. PadSplit is one of the most interesting companies that came out of the Atlanta ecosystem. I don't think that most people understand how you got into really building an amazing co-living startup. What can you tell us a little bit more about your background a little bit, but also what led you to start PadSplit?
So I've been an entrepreneur for most of my life, largely in Atlanta. I've been here 21 years. I've been in real estate, housing, construction, not at all on the technology side. I had a front row seat to everything that was happening and all of the problems in the industry, and particularly in affordable housing, and saw this massive need for better housing opportunities and improving access to those opportunities, and felt very strongly, just based on my own experience, that that there was a technology solution here that could ultimately scale and address these massive problems much more quickly and cost effectively than the traditional methods that we had been using to create affordable housing. So for me, this was probably my third real company. I was very intent on creating a legacy for positive impact in the world, and that's why I did it. It's continues to be what fuels me today.
The thing that really most impressed me about you was the fact that you were already a successful entrepreneur and you had already built companies that made impact in your communities and you had successful outcomes. What really drives you to take this big swing with PadSplit? Because financially, you really don't need it.
I've told myself many times that if I were at a different point in my career, I started in 2007, I was broke. I made total $10,000 on the year. My first son had just been born. My wife told me she was quitting her job, and I was trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do with my life to provide for my family. If I had come up with the idea of PadSplit at the time, not that I was even capable of doing it, but there's no way that I could have executed, because I would not have been in the right mind space to be able to execute. I would have been so concerned about providing for my family, and I have 4 kids. When you're struggling to survive, the types of businesses that are interesting and that you're capable of are probably very different. PadSplit and the problem that we're trying to solve, which is effectively access to affordable housing and ensuring that people who are serving your communities have an opportunity to live in them, it's so massive. And there are so many existing obstacles to success in that space. You're talking about vulnerable low-income populations. You're talking about massive regulation and zoning issues. You're talking about typically an industry that requires a ridiculous amount of money, and we're looking at, how do you do this with $0? There were so many issues there that I think, had I not been already successful as an entrepreneur or in a place in my life and my career where I was capable of taking that risk and knowing that it was a risk for me as and my time versus truly a risk on my family's ability to feed themselves, I think I could not have done it had I been in a different position. And so it truly has been for me, and what continues to feed me today is like the stories of transformational life impacts, where we see both members and hosts who have transformed their lives, and without this business, without this opportunity, would not have had that same ability. And so those are the things that continue to fuel me today and have since the very beginning.
Do you believe that you being a repeat entrepreneur contributed to the success of PadSplit so far?
Any entrepreneurship journey teaches you the power of resilience. I get rejected every single day. And And there are massive hurdles that you have to confront every single day. Having lived as an entrepreneur for a long time and just understanding the mindset of uh, being hungry continuously and living in that state of mind absolutely contributes to our success as a business. I'm generally a believer that the longer you can survive, the more likely you are to succeed. Being an entrepreneur for a long period of time teaches you the value of survival and being able to control your own destiny to whatever degree you're able.
You've been an entrepreneur for over 15 years now. As a founder, does it get easier for you to deal with rejection on an ongoing basis?
There's a great quote from Picasso: "The older I get, the stronger the wind blows, and it's always in my face." And I think that's probably true. But there's another part of that that is unmentioned, which is you are also stronger. And through the journey of entrepreneurship, whatever that next theoretically insurmountable hurdle is, you just keep going and you realize, oh, okay, we can actually do that thing or overcome that obstacle. You do not quit and you just keep moving forward. And over time, what you come to recognize is not that the rejection part is easier, but that you are better equipped to handle it. And you either have the mental fortitude or not, but it's a challenge every day. But there's no doubt, as I look at some of the struggles that we confront now, I would not have been able to confront if I'd had them just 5 years ago. And so, yeah, they're harder, but you're stronger as a person.
I'm going to switch the topic to hiring and building teams. One of the things that I realized over the last couple of years, as I interacted with a lot more early stage founders, you had a unique take on PadSplit that I haven't seen with many out there, which was your relentless focus on team culture and overall the mission of the company. I joined the team relatively early on when we were less than 20 people. And even back then, it was very prominent for me how much emphasis you put on culture. Tell us a little bit more about what gave you that conviction and why the culture of the company was so important for you.
A lot of it is practical in that I am investing a ton of my time, energy, and dollars into this enterprise. And from the very beginning, from one of the first companies that I had started, a longtime partner and I agreed it has to be fun and hopefully it's profitable. But if it's not fun, then you are wasting your time. So you want to enjoy spending time with the people that you are going to spend a tremendous amount of your daily life with. Even if you're not running a mission driven company, that's pretty core to any hiring strategy. You have to enjoy the people that you work with. It goes beyond just like culture or impact. One of our longtime advisors has said, look, there are three gates for any hiring decision. The first is character, and the second is competence, the third is charisma. And you can't get to the next gate until you pass through the first one. Life is too short to deal with working with assholes. And for people who are so hungry that they're willing to burn bridges or sacrifice basic principles to achieve ends, it's not worthwhile. And so what type of business or what type of enterprise, even if it's not a business, like what type of culture are you building? And what do you want to invest in? It's pretty straightforward for me at a core level. Okay, well, do people show up on time? Do they do what they say they're going to do? Do you enjoy spending time with them? Right. And are they kind and respectful people? That should just be baseline, because there are a lot of people who just don't fit those categories. And again, life is too short. For me, though, in building a mission-driven company, it was also important that they believed in the mission of the company. They understood why we were here, so that whenever they were off on their own, unsupervised, I always felt like if you're hiring someone, you need someone who's capable of making independent judgment decisions. And when they are making those independent judgment decisions, if they have the same North Star as I do in the company, then I can have confidence that 9 times out of 10, they're going to make the right decision or make the decision that I would make in that same circumstance. And so more so than anything else, it comes down to culture and what are your values as an individual that I think play the key role in understanding if they're going to be successful in that position or not.
What are those core values at the center of PadSplit?
We have two sets. So we have guiding principles, which apply to all of our stakeholders. So we're a two-sided marketplace. So we have residents on one side of the marketplace who we refer to as members, and we have the supply side, the housing providers, who are hosts on the other side. And then we have, of course, ourselves and the independent contractors that we deal with and the vendors in all of our business relationships. And so for all of those stakeholders, the guiding principles still apply, which are care, show it, and prove it. You have to care about what you're doing. And I think circling back to your point about culture and why I thought it was so important, you have to have someone who cares. And then the next questions are they willing to act on that level of care? And if they see a piece of trash on the street, are they going to pick it up? If the office is unclean, like, are they going to go clean the kitchen? Are they going to go out of their way proactively to prove that they care about the environment? And so those guiding principles apply to everyone. And then the core values that we hire or fire based off of are compassionate directness, high integrity, optimism, intellectual curiosity, strong work ethic, empathy, and self-awareness. And for every employee review, for every hiring decision, evaluating based on those, both the guiding principles and those core values are extremely important.
Have you struggled maintaining that a strong team culture and the values that you wanted your teams to instill as you scaled the company?
Life is a series of trade-off decisions. You always have a choice of whether or not you want to hire someone who may be, I don't know, the Michael Jordan of whatever field they happen to be in, but they don't fit those values, right? Or they may have questionable character. You run into those situations all the time. Or do you want to promote the person and reward those individuals who, maybe they knocked it out of the park from a performance perspective, but like they have absolutely disrespected everybody in the company. So like you have those decisions to make all the time. There are always trade-offs and opportunity costs with what you want to do, and none of it's easy. If the North Star of the company is we want to go solve the affordable housing crisis, and it requires me compromising my values or those employee core values to do that, like that's a struggle. I mean, it really is. And none of those decisions are easy, which is why entrepreneurship is hard. I'm not sure that that we've gotten it right every time, or that we've done something great. But yeah, at the end of the day, you got to be able to live with yourself and sleep at night and look all your employees in the eye and say, okay, here's how we're operating, and we're going to be consistent in this approach, or at least try to be as consistent as we possibly can be. We're going to screw up, but it's the only way that I've been able to function as the company has scaled. And going back to not just the core values, but we have mission, vision, guiding principles, core values, and really every major decision that I make, I try to look at that decision, and I hope that most of our staff does as well, through the lens of mission, vision, values.
At the time, I called this hiring missionaries versus mercenaries.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe PadSplit had a lot better of a batting average when we at the time focused on hiring missionaries,
Mm-hmm.
the believers, if you will.
Sure.
You mentioned it yourself. It is really important to have that buy-in early on. Is that something you struggled more as you scaled the company? Because early days it was just 20 of us. We were
Yeah.
talking about less than 1,000 units. you guys have surpassed by now, I'm assuming, 11,000 units. The companies are operating at a much higher scale. Do you face this trade-off often?
I think you faced it from the beginning. There's always this question as you scale a company. Oh, well, person A may have brought you from 1 to 10,000, but are they really the person to bring you from 10,000 to 100,000 or 10,000 to a million? One of the challenges is as the company scales, instead of generalists, you need more skill positions. Of course, just finished Super Bowl season. Like, you don't need the guys who are playing offense and defense and special teams all at the same time. You need a really good cornerback in order to win the game, a really good defensive end. And I think that the same is true as you get to a certain level of scale, that instead of having one individual who can do all of the things, now you have a team of 30 who are in that same department. And of course, you need specialists. It's still a framework, right? I mean, at the end of the day, and particularly with the way that we have recruited and hired previously, we really have had almost no shortage of talent. And I have been consistently impressed. I can't explain why. Almost every role that we have opened, I've been in awe of the talent that has applied. And that's been since day one, right? I've really been humbled by the caliber of talent that has sought out working for this company. Because that's always been the case for us, whether we were 10 people or 100, it's just like the culture interview has just been another step. I think it's been pretty consistent in our ability to recruit people who still make it through those various steps and fit within the culture. It hasn't really been a challenge to be able to make sure that we have folks who make it through the cultural interview. I hear it consistently from people who work for us today. Man, look at the culture that we've built. Like, these are great folks. They're extremely talented. They're extremely smart. And gosh, they're just good people, and we're thrilled to be part of the mission. So as long as that continues to be the case, we'll keep on going.
I have a hypothesis about why Pat was able to attract the amazing talent that you see in the company today. And I think that was your willingness to hire remotely and to a certain extent globally. You have started doing this way before COVID. One of my earliest hires was Dennis, who's leading the marketing team today. And you didn't even blink when I asked you to allow me to hire someone from the West Coast.
Sure.
What led you to your flexibility on that front? Because to this day, it is still a contentious topic, remote and not being in the same location.
I've never understood the debate, honestly. I really, really haven't. Every startup book you ever read talks about two things. One is like, hire the absolute best talent you can get, and hire for culture. Like, nobody says, go hire the people who live closest to you. Like, I have yet to see that in any hiring manual ever. We run this campaign now called It's Just Math. And it's just math. Like, Atlanta's a great town for hiring prospective talent.
Yeah.
But you know what's even bigger than Atlanta? The world's population. The world is bigger. And there's always going to be someone out there who is better than me at doing whatever this thing happens to be. And so I think acknowledging that there is talent universally throughout the world, and my ability to hire the best talent that I can possibly find that also meets my mission, vision, values, the likelihood is significantly greater if the number of people that I can potentially attract is in the billions versus tens of thousands, right? And so that's always been the case for me. The location was just another hurdle to overcome. But if you're choosing for talent, location, values, like, there's no doubt in my mind which two out of the three are the most important. And location just wasn't one of them. I mean, airplanes exist. We can fly people in. We can go visit them. If there's that much value in being in person, and I don't want to discount that there's tremendous value in being in person, particularly in the earlier stages of the company, when it's just like constantly popcorning ideas around. But you can replicate a lot of that in the technology environment that exists today.
Interwebs is magical.
Yeah. The internets has really changed the world, and in some ways, folks have either embraced those challenges or not. And there are lots of ways to run a company successfully. I'm sure. For me, it's always been a question of where do we find the best talent that matches our values, like period.
Yeah.
And then you work around that.
It's just math, right? Like Metro Atlanta is, give or take 6 million people.
Yeah.
Overall US over 330 million people.
Yeah.
Globally, we are at roughly 8 billion people. So the more you expand your geographical footprint, the more you're gonna basically improve your ability to access the most amazing talent that you can get.
Yeah.
So and I completely agree with you. And I don't want to put it as there are no challenges to building a remote company. As long as you are intentional about building a remote team, the upside way surpasses the downside you might have trying to building a remote team.
Yeah. Like the word intentional is important there, right? And to our conversation about the culture and the core values, if you are not specific with all of your hiring managers and everyone in the company with these are the core values and we are serious. And so every week at all hands, like we recite, and I will call on an individual person or take a volunteer to recite from memory. This is our mission. This is our vision. These are our guiding principles. These are our core values. And so that everyone in the company knows those things. But that takes work to ingrain those messages, particularly in a remote environment. And I think one of the advantages of an in-person company versus a remote one is you don't necessarily have to do that. If you have a group of people who are together every single day, they probably just have a sense innately, because they're working together constantly, of what those individuals' values happen to be. Without needing to be reminded. You have to be intentional about scheduling one-on-ones and scheduling every meeting. So it requires a much greater degree of intentionality, and it's new, right? Richard Branson has been running Virgin Atlantic as mostly a remote company since the 60s, from an island in the middle of the Caribbean. like clearly people have figured out remote cultures before. Like clearly every major corporation has multiple offices around the world, and somehow they still manage to function. I think it's just an evolution of the workplace, and it's not that it's better or worse, it's different. From my perspective, the question has always just been, where do you find talent?
The first, I believe, purpose-built office building was built over 300 years ago. So we've been doing in-person for about 300 years. And remote has become a dynamic for the work culture since COVID. Remote has so much room for us to improve it. I think we barely scratched the surface. If you want to make it work, you can make it work.
I really think it's just a question of communication. We're clearly still very early in this evolution, but the workforce has already spoken, right? As much as you hear about CEOs who want to get people back in the office, it's pretty clear based on the people who have returned or not, where their mindset is.
I want to learn a little bit more about your hiring philosophy. What are your strongly held beliefs about hiring and building teams?
I think you hire for talent and for values first, and you do that wherever you can find those individuals. Beyond that, I think referrals absolutely matter. I think it was Work Rules by the former Google head of HR that talked about referrals being the only indicator of all the reference points that they had talked about. as being meaningful for contributions within a company and the tenure therein. For my closely held belief, I would say like enthusiasm, perspicacity, which is a word I took from one of our board members, Catherine Petralia. I always say the ability to make independent judgment decisions. Perspicacity, which is the ability to make those independent judgment decisions quickly and make sure that they're the right ones. Enthusiasm, perspicacity, and just grit to some degree. Those are far more important than experience in a particular field. And if someone can learn quickly, even though it might take them longer to get up to speed, I think all in all, I look at each of these hires as investment. If you intend for the company to be around for 10, 20, 100 years, the difference of a couple months in getting caught up to speed is significant when you can bring on advisors, when you have a breadth of network that someone who can learn very quickly and aligns with your values, if they can absorb a lot of the skills and experience necessary, then generally they're going to be a better long-term investment. That's been what I've seen so far. You start to realize just that you need a pipeline of talent, not just externally to be able to recruit for these new skill positions as you grow, but also internally within the company so that you can grow your own future leadership.
I completely agree. It's a hill that I'm willing to die on, especially for startups. You need to hire for attributes, traits, rather than a specific experience.
Yeah.
And the biggest one that I keep repeating to founders I engage with, please do not hire for pedigree. That fancy tech company experience at scale and that top tier school degree doesn't necessarily correlate with success at early stage startups. And I'm not necessarily saying that you shouldn't hire those people, just don't hire them specifically for those attributes. Look for the traits that you're looking for.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, if we acknowledge that a company with 1,000 or 10,000 people, they are likely to have very good skill players. They are hiring for skill positions. And so if you are then recruiting for a generalist position at a startup of fewer than 30 people, you're not necessarily going to get it from someone who was a great skill player at a particular name brand company. So yeah, I definitely agree that as I look at our current team and leadership team, it has been so much more about the individual than any sort of background or where they like the name brand of where they've worked. Now, the one exception I might make is if you know that you are trying to emulate a certain culture within a company, and you have another company that has a very similar culture, like that's probably a good sourcing ground for where you might find talent. But yeah, those are
you would be focusing on the traits of the company, not necessarily
exactly.
what the brand name is. Yeah,
exactly right. Yeah, well, and in a totally different field in many cases. If you were comparing, I know a lot of folks hire management consultants, so certain management consultancies have different brand reputations and different cultures than others. There is a huge portion of the hireable population who has some sort of management consulting background, and you can probably tell something about the traits just based on the firm where they work.
What is your contrarian take on hiring? Tell us something that most would disagree with, or a little bit maybe controversial.
Yeah, I guess I might turn the question the other way. It's like who agrees with me on hiring? I think the contrarian take is really just hire the best talent you can, and it doesn't matter where they are. I mean, our CFO and our head of engineering are in Texas. Our head of marketing is in Washington State. I'm in Atlanta. We have a lot of folks overseas as well, who are great hires. And then I think that the cultural aspect, right? I mean, as long as you're intentional about it, that you can truly be effective even with folks you have never met in person before, which is something that consistently surprises me in a good way. I was in Turkey recently. I guess it wasn't that recently, a couple months ago, for an event, and met some of our contractors there, and we were all sitting in a room together. and I asked everybody without really any prompting to come up with messaging for our resident community, like a one-liner. What is our tagline for the that we want to build marketing campaigns around to target the resident community and then the host community? And there were 16 people in that room. I had met one of them in person before, ever. Most of them I'd never had a one-on-one conversation with. And yet everyone's response on that question was very simple. We were all very much aligned with what those taglines should be, even though we had never spent any time together in person, and even though I had never met any of those people individually. I think that's a testament to how you can still successfully build culture and alignment with folks that are extremely geographically disparate.
So one of the things you mentioned earlier on was the person who takes you from 0 to 1,000 might be different than 1,000 to 10 and 10,000 to 100,000. Has your views changed about the profiles of either senior or, at all levels, talent that you want to attract for PadSplit now that you are over 5 years into this journey?
Yes and no. I think, and what I state now is still subject to change, for the record. So, yeah, with the caveat that could be wrong, may come up with a different answer tomorrow. What I've learned so far is that at least for us, it's been way more effective to groom talent for the future versus expecting that you're going to make a high-powered hire from the outside that will give you a sea change to move from, say, 1 to 10,000 versus 10,000 to 100,000. Listen, there are the people inside your organization know more about your organization and your problems than anybody outside, right? Because they've been thinking about it for every workday and probably into the night, and maybe I've been dreaming about it for a long, long time. You can get fresh insights from lots of different folks and give them a view into whatever the particular problem happens to be. And if it's tactical, those things are more easily solvable. What I struggle with is, can you go hire an expert? And maybe this gets to the last question we were talking about. If you hire someone with a pedigree from big company X that has done it before, can they do it again? Not saying that doesn't happen. I'm sure it does. But the likelihood that you're going to find that person who also aligns with mission, vision, values is pretty slim. And I think much harder than if you hire a junior person and groom them over the course of 2, 3, 4, 5 years inside your organization so that they understand all of the nuance. They have built relationships across the organization, and they've proven themselves, both from a cultural aspect as well as from an achievement perspective. And then if they can learn quickly, then they can be poised to serve in a management role. It doesn't mean that you don't still need a skill hire who can take you to the next level, right? I think there's a strong distinction between someone who is a fast learning generalist, and that person can be taught to manage people, or in some cases already has managed people. And some cases that takes longer, right? I mean, in different businesses, there is a rate of growth for a company or the organization, and there's a rate of growth for the individual. And one of the hardest things as an entrepreneur is evaluating when has the rate of growth of the organization surpassed the rate of growth of this amazing individual contributor performer. And that happens. And it is just the evolution of an organization. And sometimes you have to go outside to be able to find someone that can match the rate of growth. What I prefer to do, if at all possible, is how do you take this individual and level them up, either with skill players or with someone who's just a more effective manager or operator, and understanding what is their superpower, can we build around it or not, to maintain the same pace of the organization. But like you have something here that's worth trying to figure out how to make it function, and how do you redesign the machine so that the person is developing faster, or at least as fast as the organization. But that's the challenge of growing company. At the end of the day, even if you have to hire her outside, I still think culture sits at the core.
One of the things you mentioned was how surprised you are to this day the quality of talent PadSplit was able to attract compared to competitors that raised a lot more money than we did at the time. How do you think you were able to attract top talent on a startup budget? Because by no means you raised the amount of money that some of your competitors have.
I think people want a reason to go to work, right? They want a reason to wake up in the morning, and they want to feel good about what they're doing. Beyond anything else, I think what separates us from our competitors is we've done that for people. And it's pretty hard not to feel good about what you're doing when you see some of those amazing personal stories. So that's the key differentiator, I think. And then aside from that, it is just being able to and willing to cast a wider net so that you can find more of those people, and not limiting ourselves by geography, to find those folks that are driven by the mission and are really enthusiastic about showing up to work for a mission-driven company.
You have emphasized the importance of culture and mission. How do you structure your interview process so that you can assess that cultural fit?
There is an interview that is strictly dedicated to cultural fit. We are evaluating very much based on, and they won't be direct questions like, do you believe in compassionate directness? But yeah, you can find out, okay, well, tell me about the last really uncomfortable or awkward situation you had in a work environment or in a personal environment, and how you dealt with that situation. That's a pretty straightforward way to do it. You can start to understand pretty quickly if an individual is deferential on either citing themselves as the sole reason, or, hey, like, I was really grateful to be part of a team to do this, right? And so just mannerism, speech, but there's an entire interview that's dedicated to answering those cultural questions, and so that's how we do it. And much like the character, competence, charisma, we don't evaluate based on charisma. That bridge is maybe a little bit too far. Not everyone can have charisma, but yeah, I mean, there are a series of interviews that are based around evaluating character and competence. It doesn't really matter what particular role we're hiring for, and they're all different, right? If you're hiring for an engineer, it's going to be very different than hiring for a graphic designer. But yeah, you're testing both their ability to learn quickly, the skills that they have, and their character.
One of the things that really interests me is learning from the mistakes of other entrepreneurs. I think overall we have this overarching survivorship bias and focus on the success stories too much. And not that it's not well deserved. There are so many unique circumstances that make a company successful that sometimes we miss the big picture. I want to learn from your hiring mistakes. What was like one of the biggest learnings about hiring you have now, you wish you knew when you started PadSplit?
I did not write down mission, vision, values until July of 2020. If I had to do it again, I wish I would have done that before, like pre-day one. I don't know that I necessarily could have, because you only kind of, a lot of this stuff, like, I learned over my own experience. But there were absolutely hires that we made where we prioritized skills or pedigree over those values and mission alignment and ability to learn quickly. Like, absolutely. We felt like we had to check a box where we are at this number of people, therefore, based on feedback from our advisors or our board or just outside industry. We know that we're supposed to go like fill this role and plug this gap. And
Was
almost
that more
universal.
of a fundraising milestone for you?
Yeah, it's partly that. There are so many mistakes that can be made just by pattern matching generally, and I think we are social beings. Like, we are all sheep to some degree or another, and the decisions that are often made from pattern matching behaviors or from following the examples of others can lead you astray as often as they prove successful. I think those are probably the biggest mistakes that I've seen, and why I continue to come back to the stated mission, vision, values, and then below that you have some strategic documents that kind of guide how the company actually functions. But yeah, it's trusting your gut, I think, to a large degree, and understanding that as a CEO or a founder, no one will know your company better than you do in the overwhelming majority of cases. And trusting your instincts on that is, I think, a big part of it. When you make a bad hire, you usually know within the first couple of weeks. When you know that bad hire has been made, sometimes it's not on your team, right? Sometimes it's another manager has made a bad hire and you know it. When do you rip off that Band-Aid, and how quickly does it happen? What's the teachable moment for that manager? And how do you teach that lesson for the individual manager? So those are absolutely some of the hardest things, because you're talking about people's lives, right? And
Yeah.
it doesn't take long to build a relationship and care about a person. None of it's easy, and it's just a question of have you learned from the mistakes so you don't do it again.
Yep.
But we've made a number of those, as I'm sure every growing company has. And circling back to the start of the call, right? You move on and you're resilient, and you recognize, okay, we'll take the L and try to do better next time. And hopefully you have the resilience to be able to have a next time.
Yeah. So I've rarely seen those type of feelings go away when it comes to bad hires.
Yeah,
And um, uh, I can't think of a single use case where I was able to turn that
yeah,
relationship around. And I know it's going to sound heartless, but I think the lesson that I learned was that you are better making a decision quickly rather than dragging that relationship out,
sure, yeah,
because
no
you're
question.
not doing you're not making the individual a favor either.
uh, I think the truism of you hire slowly, fire quickly is generally accurate. You don't always have the ability to hire too slowly, um, but yeah, when you know something's not right, and I mean you can smell it, right? And you just
Yeah.
almost right away that this is not a fit, and we could have saved a lot of money had we made some of those decisions earlier. And
Yeah.
I think as one of the struggles for me as a CEO is that no human being, or almost no human being, wants to make those decisions. Firing people is always really, really hard. Oh,
Unless you're a sociopath.
yeah. But as a CEO, like, you often have to be the forcing function
Yeah.
for that manager. Uh, and that's it's a tough place to be in. It's a tough role to play.
I want to lastly touch on hiring executives versus individual contributors.
Mhm.
What was your biggest learnings about making senior hires for PadSplit?
Yeah, it's the same fundamentals, honestly. The primary distinction is the skills that you're evaluating on are more based around management than individual contributions, and there is a big difference among certain people, and I'm sure you can think of several who are outstanding individual contributors and not great managers. And there are other people who are not great individual communicators who are unbelievable managers. So I think really just understanding that one does not necessarily translate to another. Just because you are potentially the smartest person in the world doesn't mean that you're going to be great in a management position. And you've got skills and you've got EQ questions, organizational questions. Those gateways are the same and the thresholds are the same, and you're evaluating the same things, right? I mean, you're looking for talent, you're looking for enthusiasm, you're looking for people who can learn quickly. Uh, but you also want to get an understanding of, can this person perform as a manager versus an individual contributor? And that's really the core difference. And then, of course, for me personally, I'm going to be spending a lot of time with that person. And so, like, do we get along? Do we have a great working relationship, or the potential for a great working relationship?
Is it important for you that you like that person at an individual level?
Like is a strong word, and I'll frame it maybe on a use case. You have to be willing to pick up the phone and call the person and trust what they tell you. Like and trust kind of get fuzzy sometimes. I don't think you have to like someone in order to trust them, but you have to trust them. So I think that's
I like that. I like that part.
and you have to acknowledge, like, between the two of you, like, compassionate directness, first core value, right? You have to acknowledge, like, that sometimes you don't share the same interests or necessarily enjoy spending time together,
Mm-hmm.
but you have implicit trust.
This was great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, my pleasure.
I really appreciate you making the time.
By all means. Well, good luck, and yeah, hopefully my makeup shows up okay on LinkedIn.